Greetings, everyone, and welcome to SIRDCAST episode number 6. We have the incredible Stephen Shedden on the line here, and we have the illustrious Ollie Fisher. Stephen, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey guys, how you all doing? Thanks very much for having me.
Excellent. Ollie, so we've been trying to do different styles and different folks here, but I mean, Stephen's story, I think, is pretty incredible. World champion pipe band drummer. He's been with different groups. He's a student of Jim Kilpatrick. The shed drum is honestly one of the hottest things, I think, during COVID. And for me, I think it's an honor to have Stephen on because I think he's one of the bright lights of the future.
Yes, and especially for me, it was really these shed drum lessons were really amazing to understand and to learn about a complete new way of how you set up the drumming in a traditional but also in a modern way. So I'm really looking forward to this podcast and to learn more about Stephen and his ideas.
So, Stephen, if you could, can you walk us through a little bit of how you first started drumming, what kind of brought you to it?
Yeah, I should just say before we start, I'm sitting next to a main road here in the kind of city of Melbourne. So there's traffic lights and about 100 cars go through at one time. So if there's any background noise, then I can only apologise. But yeah, we're dealing with what we've got.
Awesome.
You can hear me okay now, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. So, I kind of come from a musical family, and my dad was a bagpiper, and he was quite a successful bagpiper at that. And so there was always music in the house, and I always remember his CD collection was like just a huge shelf, which was like top to bottom, he had like almost everything. He just loved every single genre of music. He tried to start me on the bagpipes, and I didn't really take to it that much. And I always remember thinking that I wanted to be a drum kit player. I wanted to be a rock star, playing drum kit in a band. And I remember asking my mum and dad, or kind of saying it to my mum and dad, and they weren't really keen on the idea because they didn't want to have a drum kit in the house because of the noise. And it's only really when I think about it now, it's like bagpipes are one of the most noisiest instruments that you can have. Do you know what I mean? So I didn't really understand. As I said, I tried the pipes, didn't really take to it, kind of wanted to play drums. And I remember saying to my dad, well, what if I go and play the drums that go along with the pipes? And he kind of came round to that idea a bit more. So it was almost like a kind of compromise. So my dad used to play in pipe bands as well, and he had a few kind of contacts of kind of drummers that he used to play with as well. So I started going for lessons in the back of an old pipe band shop in Glasgow, which was called the Band Room. And the guy that was working in there was called David Call, and he kind of started me off, basic rudiments, show me how to hold the sticks and everything. I went for lessons with David for a good amount of time until the Band Room was bought over as a company. And then I started going to the new owner for lessons, which was a guy called Brian McComish. So the lessons that I had with Brian were still in the shop, but it was purely like building my hands. Like I remember we would sit for an hour, and we wouldn't even touch a drum score, but it was all about getting that kind of finger and thumb technique. So we'd sit for an hour and just pure taps, like and then on to the left, and we would do that for ages. And I always remember thinking at the time, I was like, we're not really playing any drum scores. I'm not doing any fancy backsticking that I always wanted to do. And looking back on it now, it's one thing that I actually tell my students now, that it's probably the best thing that ever happened to me. Being able to build my hands and really get that kind of technique going that we use in the pipe band. So there's no point in being a pipe band drummer if you're not in a pipe band. So my brother was a bagpiper at the time as well. He still is, sorry. And we joined the local pipe band, which was Boghall Novice Juvenile Pipe Band, which was the closest one to me at the time. So we played for a year in the juvenile band, and I was going for lessons week in, week out. So I thought I was making kind of good progress. So then it came around. I wanted to kind of move on a little bit and join my first adult band. So I was 12 years old at that time, and joined a band called Glasgow Sky, which were grade 2. And did a season with them. I was still going to lessons with Brian at the Band Room, and Brian was actually affiliated with one of the drum corps in Scotland, Boghall and Bathgate, Caledonia pipe band. So when I was 13, I got the opportunity to join them, and that was my kind of first kind of big grade one band. You know, I was 13 years old. You know, it was amazing, just surrounded by all these other drummers and everything. You know, and it was my kind of first time that I was playing a corps where, you know, everyone was in there for the same reason, sort of thing. You know, you just wanted to go and play good music. So I had 3 years with Boghall, and within that time I started going for lessons with Gordon Brown as well, who actually is Jim Kilpatrick's cousin. So I was with Gordon for 3 years, and then the opportunity came up to join Shots. And I'd always idolised Jim Kilpatrick from a young age. I remember one Worlds, it must have been my first Worlds that I went to. He was at the Premier tent at the time, and Shots Drumcorps come on, did a fanfare, blew my mind, and then he was signing sticks and posters and things after it. So I remember he signed my sticks, and I got a signed poster from him, and I had that poster on my wall, like from a young age. You know, to Stephen, best keep drumming, Jim Kilpatrick sort of thing, and I always had that on my wall. So when it came to the opportunity to join, like I couldn't say yes quick enough. So then I played with Shots for a few years, then I actually took a bit of time out of pipe bands. And I was involved in a group called Bags of Rock, which was like a rock band, but with bagpipes as the vocals. So even though I was out of pipe bands, I was still playing all the time. And it's one of those things, you know, that never really leaves you. You know, it's one of the things that that community is always kind of going to be there. So I took a bit of time out and travelled around Europe, doing kind of festivals with Bags of Rock, had an incredible time. And then I heard it was going to be Jim's retirement year in 2016. And from not being in pipe bands, that made me go like, I can't miss that. Like that's something that I, you know, wanted to do, and it's something that I would remember for the rest of my life as well. So joined Spirit of Scotland pipe band in 2016, and that was with the lineup that they had was incredible. Like it was all these guys that played with Jim previously, some of the guys that did the Grand Slam with Jim when they won all the 5 majors in a row, and it's never been done again. So playing in that line was, you know, surrounded by guys who I never ever thought I'd get the chance to play with, you know, and all of a sudden you're standing next to these legends, as well as all the guys that was playing with them, these current corps as well, you know. So it was probably one of the best things I've done in pipe bands, you know, joining that line. And then of course, when Jim retired, that's when it was him actually that put me in contact with people in Australia, and I've been out here pretty much ever since. Yeah,
that's incredible. I mean, I'd love to unpack a few of these things if that's all right.
absolutely.
So, yeah. So I mean, we definitely have some questions here, but I kind of want to sit on this first one for a little bit. So when you were starting out, right? So there's the pipe band, there's the competition scene with all the different grades. Are there different other avenues people get into pipe band other than the competition scene in Scotland?
You have your kind of military bands and bands who will just go out and do parades. But the main thing in Scotland is there's the mostly competition. Anything that I was always involved in was always competition bands. But you have bands that will, as I said, just go and do parades and galleries and things like that. For me, like when playing a competition band, you know, when the email or the word came out that we had a gala day, you know, we were always like, oh, we've got a gala day, like really, you know, we need to go march, you know, just play all this stuff, you know, we just want to go out and compete, sort of thing, you know. So I never really done the whole kind of non-competition side. Any band that I was in was always purely based on competition.
Got it. And so, I mean, at that point too, when you hopped into your first grade one, and you said you were 13 at your first grade one.
Yeah.
I mean, at that point, I mean, you're just trying to hang on. I'm imagining, right? So, what was that like being in there the first time?
Crazy. You know, even the sound, you know, you can tell by the rolls, the intro rolls. So pipe band drum corps always start with 2-3 pace rolls. And even from, you play, you can tickle away in a novice juvenile band sort of thing. But then when you get to the kind of hardcore, you know, kind of drummers, like the you feel the vibrations in the rolls, you know, just from the you feel the vibrations of the drum just in the rolls themselves, you know, the ground's shaking. So you know, your first time in there, you know, and it's a good thing about pipe bands is everyone, you know, in the corps, it's like a brotherhood, you know, so everyone's always looking out for you, sort of thing, you know, and you spend so much time with these guys, you know. In grade one, usually we'll practice twice a week. So I had really, really good guys around me, and who would kind of take care of you, and you wouldn't. You kind of know before, if you were going to play or not. If you're going to get dropped or not. It's usually done, the kind of week before or whatever, or even a few weeks before. So I was quite confident in the tuition that I had, that I was going to be okay in the line, and it was an incredible experience. And so the first year that we had in Boghall, it was like, you couldn't have wrote it. Like first year in Grade 1, like we won the Champions of Champions that year, and it was incredible. Like, and you it's such a high, like, especially from such a young age as well. But at the time, you don't even think about it. I look back at now, and kids that I'm teaching now that are maybe 13 years and just maybe starting, and it's you don't really think about it at the time, the level that you're playing at.
Yeah.
But it's pretty
That's
cool.
great. I mean, those kids are going to be watching. They're watching what you're doing, and then they're going to be building on what you do. And so, 10 years from now, we have the next Stephen Shedden. What does that look like? It's crazy. That's great. So, Ollie, you want to hop into the next question?
Yes, and before we maybe go to the special style and so on, can you tell us a little bit about your communities? I mean, you mentioned and I'm always amazed how I see this mix of young people, elderly people, these gatherings. You talk about competitions. So how does a year look in Scotland when you learn drumming as a young person? Because I know you mentioned so many things, but how does it look? When do you start, and how do you gain to that, and what are the highlights? How do you trigger that? That would be interesting for me to know.
So in Scotland, there's almost a pipe band within the season. There's almost a pipe band competition every single weekend. So they're kind of split up into major and minor competitions. So we have the 5 major competitions, which are the ones that all the overseas bands, some of the overseas bands will usually fly in for. So like your Scottish Championships, your UK, whatever, so on and so forth, and then the World Championship. All these bands will usually fly in for them. So the major competitions are always the busiest sort of thing, and they're always the ones where you get most Grade 1 bands going to. Unfortunately, the minor competitions don't always have the Grade 1 competitions playing. But I mean, you still get a very, very good standard across the other grades as well. So as a youngster, you're exposed to a really, really good standard of playing at a young age. So you have your 5 majors, and then the whole season. So when I was a kid in Mulgai, novice juvenile, we'd be out every single weekend, and the whole family is there, and it's just like a whole other world, that you're kind of exposed to, and you make friends with people all over the world as well, which is really incredible. So yeah, I mean, the season ends now with the World Championships in Glasgow, and that's the kind of pinnacle that everyone's kind of always gearing up to the Worlds. And that whole week, there's a whole piping festival, which is Piping Live, and there's whole loads of various kind of competitions and gigs and events and stuff going on that whole week, and then ending with the World Championships.
Because I was amazed when I talked to Jim when he was in Basel at our competitions, that he mentioned that it's the same trigger in driving in competitions, and how you manage that and give that high quality in drumming and in technique. And I think, Mark, we discussed that as well. You from the American drumming, Swiss drumming, also very competitive, and festivals similar like the Scottish. And I think that would lead to my next question, Stephen. What is, and maybe you also can show it with your pad and your stick, what is unique about this pipe band drumming? If you compare Mark from the American drumming, original me from Swiss drumming, how do you see the differences, and what are the characters of this pipe band drumming?
Yeah, well, start off, we'll play with bagpipes for a start. But I think the main kind of thing for me, anyway, when I compare kind of pipe band drumming to other kind of styles, is the kind of pipe band flow that we have. This kind of really kind of loose kind of technique of playing, and we play a lot of closed rolls. So I don't know if it's the most closed rolls I've ever played in rudimental drumming, but we play a lot of closed rolls as well, where there's a lot of other corps would kind of go for more open stuff. We're never usually clicked either. You know, we're never really playing to a metronome or anything like that, like a drumline. You know, most drumline videos that I watch, you know, you hear the click in the background going all the time. I don't think I've ever been in a pipe band drum corps playing along to a click. You know, it's something we've never done, because of that, there's a lot of pushing and pulling with the bagpipes. You know, so we are there to kind of support the melody line and support the melody of the bagpipes. So there is a lot of pushing and pulling with that, and that kind of adds to the whole kind of musicality of it as well. You know, if you were to play a 2/4 march, and if you did play it to a metronome, it probably wouldn't sound as good, you know, without the pushing and pulling. You know, and we really tried to. That's one of the hard things, is trying to, you know, really get that ensemble with the piper, you know, to kind of accent what they're doing.
I love that. Real quick on that. That's something we argue about quite a bit in American style, because obviously DCI, WGI are the two huge marching band or marching scenes. And then you go into high school and college marching bands that are copying the DCI and WGI worlds. And one of the discussions we always have is, do you teach the music on the page with the metronome first, or do you let them listen to the sound of what they're a part of? And that melody that you just brought up, there's something about that, right? There's a way that the melody feels when it goes to the end of a phrase. And do you let the drumming and the music happen organically to fit together, or do you sterilize it and stay true to the metronome click? And really, that's one of the big discussions we have is, you know, can you play it to the metronome and have the technical ability to control it that way? Great. But then do you take the click away and let the music become more organic? And I'd love to hear that. Really, you guys don't do a ton of that, because in American fife and drum, there is no click ever. And there's this battle back and forth of, is that the right answer?
Yeah, totally. It's we always have a kind of running joke that, you know, pipers actually can't play to a click, you know. But
That's
nah.
hilarious.
But yeah, as you said, you know, it gives another kind of dimension, you know, or another kind of skill in itself. But don't get me wrong, I love listening to all the click stuff, and you know, when I hear DCI and everything's bang on the button, and you know, there's no room for hiding. Like I love the sound of that as well, you know. So, say I never use a metronome. Absolutely, I use a metronome when I'm kind of practicing rhythms and things, but never in a kind of drumline kind of setup.
But I think that, I think that's part of it too, is recognizing what all of the other styles bring to you as a player, because that makes you obviously better to cross styles and teach and actually be able to tell the story of pipe band drummers to people that maybe only work with a click. So now you have that relationship where I know how to play with a click. I know I can play with a rock band too, but then the Scottish thing, the real tradition of it, is very different. Here, let me introduce you a little bit to it. Most people's minds are like, they're blown trying to figure out how to not play with a click.
Yeah.
But
But yeah, I mean, I think even like the tuning of the drums as well that we use in pipe band, you know, it's so high, like it's a really high pitch, and it's one of these. It's forever getting higher and higher as years go on, you know. So I know when I post stuff on social media, you know, some people will be on like that haven't heard pipe band. They're like, what's the tuning like in that drum? Like, what's going on there, sort of thing, you know.
But that's amazing for me, you know. That's really good. You have to talk a little bit more about that, because when I was at the Royal Marine School, you know, I thought they're already high, you know, and that's the British drumming. And then they were laughing at me and say, you have no clue, you don't know what you're talking about. And then I was amazed that you also from the British Drum Company introduced these new drums. So I think there's a lot of development and working on the ideal sound and characters. So can you get some insights for us? Because I think that's really interesting next to your technique.
So as far as my drumming career goes, I've always played on Kevlar heads. Like I've always played Kevlar, but going back, you know, when you had like the kind of the rope tensions and then mylar and things, the sound was so different compared to what it is now. But I think as what happened was that the pipes kept raising in pitch as well, so the drums would come up in pitch also. But I think with kind of technology as well now, you know, the bagpipes are might be speaking out of turn here, but they're a lot more easier to maintain and things with technology, and they have systems that control the moisture on the bagpipes, which can really impact the sound. So I think I don't know if that's one of the reasons why the pitch has got higher. I'm not too sure, but the drums have certainly came up to match it as well. I mean, I don't know if it's. I mean, they can only go so high. I mean, I don't know if as time goes on they might start coming back down or whatever. Like when I hear an old pipe band recording, I hear a fat sound, like a real depth to the drums as well, which yeah. I mean, I'd say it's a different sound that we're kind of getting now. It's a lot thinner, but maybe that means there's not as much room for hiding. I don't know.
Yeah, no, and I've also seen some good groups. I mean, Simon Fraser University, and they brought the rope drums out again too. I thought that was a pretty cool thing. And have other groups done that too? Is that something that some groups are getting interested in? Is the old school sound and the new school sound and kind of blending that?
I think I know what you're talking. Is it when SFU did the Beaches of Harris suite and they started it out with the rope tension and everything, and yeah, just as a whole other dynamic. I've never really seen anyone else do it, especially not in competition. I know there was I think I can't remember. It might have been Toronto Police. I might be mistaken, but they actually started and they had just a bit of rubber and smacked that on the drum to start with, and because that just totally changed the sound, gave that whole kind of rope, kind of drum, kind of sound, and then they whipped them off and then started playing the other pitch. But apart from that, I don't really know anyone that's went out there and certainly not in competition anyway.
Right.
I don't know how the judges would look at that, but I don't know. Maybe it just takes a core to come out with a lower pitch sound and have something really fat and different, and I don't know.
Yeah, well, I mean, there were actually rules. So, I mean, I used to compete in the fife and drum competitions in New York and then also in New Jersey, things like that. And there were rules written that you were not allowed to play Swiss style drumming. You were only really allowed to play American style drumming. And it was because the judges that would come in had no background in that. So that was one of those things I think that also kind of fed into it, whereas, judges are going to have the education on what's proper execution with these different styles. And I think another mission, I think, for SIRD is to try to, bring folks in to understand these different styles so that, drumming and drum judges, things of that nature, there is access to these different styles. And there's almost basically a library of a curriculum. There's a lot of things coming out in this on the new website that are trying to bring people into the different styles of rudiments, the history of the rudiments, and then how to learn the rudiments from these different countries. So it's really interesting that you bring this up, because the other question I want to hop on what Ollie was saying too with the technique. So there's a lot of closed rolls, a lot of finger control for sure. So I mean, I know from a molar approach to a Boghall grip in the right hand to a pipe band grip in the right hand. Can you explain a little bit of the style of the hands?
Yeah, so one thing that I'll just switch camera here to my teaching cam. Here we go. And one of the things some of the comments that I get on my videos of maybe guys and playing the drum lines and stuff about my right hand, like a lot of people like really don't like this gap that I've got in the right hand. But the reason for that is just we use a lot of finger control. So if I was to do maybe more of a kind of American approach, I'm not the best person to be explaining this, but what I find that kind of limits the range of movement that I have in my fingers.
You're talking about you're talking about the space between the thumb and the first finger and leaving that open, right? Right.
Yeah. I find if I'm closed there, I can't really use that to its full potential. But whereas if I just open up ever so slightly, and what I have is the grip is actually on the side of the index finger. So the reason why it's on the side of the finger and not the front of the finger is because it would break the chain. So we always want a kind of extension of your arm in straight line. So the butt of the stick is right in the middle of my hand there. So if I go from here and I open that out, that allows me to just use these back three fingers a lot more. When most people are taught in pipe band, they're taught to hold the stick like this and not use the pinky finger. And I was always taught with that as well. It wasn't until I started going to Jim Kilpatrick that he actually kind of told me to just start putting it on there, sort of thing. And now that I think about it, I think Jim comes on and off with his. but mine's on there all the time now, like all the time. I just feel I get so much more power, and able to control the height with that as well. So yeah, that grip there, that kind of seems to annoy a lot of people. But what I was talking about with my lessons with Brian McComish, all we would do for an hour and just building this up, and that's what we would do. And literally, we'd put one stick down and just kind of have a conversation, and that's all we're doing. I think it really kind of built my hands and getting that technique. And on the left hand, I talk about this 5 points of contact in the left hand. So 1 in the webbed part, 2 your thumb over the top, 3 your index finger, 4 middle finger, and then the most vital part, the knuckle of the ring finger, is where we use all the to kind of stop the stick and control the height. But I'm more kind of, again, I'm probably not the best person to be saying this, but a more kind of DCI approach might be to kind of use more of the index finger. Whereas we're all thumb, so that's the movement there. And then you can start using the top of your thumb in kind of different ways as well. But primarily, that's the kind of movement that I'm doing. And when we talk about the flow that pipe band drumming have, if I was to play the mummy daddy exercise or the long roll or the double stroke roll, we would really work on this kind of flow of the sticks, so. Again, I hope I'm not speaking out of turn here, but when I watch a kind of the other kind of styles, there'd be more kind of this sort of thing going on, and it's all really kind of straight up and down. When I think about pipe band, I think about kind of making kind of waves with a stick. So if I was to do the mummy daddy, we're always creating this kind of wave, and that's how we're taught to roll in pipe bands as well. We take the kind of double stroke roll and progress it into a buzz. And that's how we develop the close roll as well. So that's definitely one of the main things for me about pipe band drumming. Is just that kind of flow, and using a lot of dot and cuts as well. Making it really swingy. Things like that. But yeah, I'd say that's one of the main differences, especially the way we hold the sticks, and kind of getting that kind of fluid motion as well. I hope that makes sense.
Yes, it is. And you know what? The funny thing is, Mark, if you look at it, who has the same style? The French. The French. I'm talking, but I like very much what you're saying, and you are just to be clear here, you are the right person to show that, because I think that's exactly the issue. Everyone says, yeah, I'm not, we always have this ideal, it has to be like this or that. But I see now, when I look especially at, if we are talking more to each other, that everyone starts now to adopt his own style. So it's always a combination of what you learned, where you grow up. And I think, Mark, you're also a good example on it. And then how you then manage yourself, what you want to achieve, and that creates your own style. For me, it was interesting how you right grip, for example, because like we said, we learn to be, very clear. You lift it and the molar process, and you have this organic, I will call it, this round and always this movement who gives you this, not on the thing, it's always before or after. This gives the groove. And the interesting thing is, when I look at your technique, and that's what is interesting for me when I look at the Frenchies, when they also do play a lot with the fingers. So they're not going into the movements. They actually control much more, and it's more round. And of course, the complete opposite of your style, very open, and the sound is, of course, very low. And because of that, it's interesting to see with the same technique from a grip technique, a complete different sound and style. But the idea behind it, that you are open it up and use this organic, I think that's quite interesting to see, and it gives me also a little bit thoughts to how you can create that in that how you control it, So it's very interesting.
One thing I was never really taught, and it wasn't until I started looking into the kind of American kind of DCI style more, that I was never taught like heights, like to have my sticks like 1 inch off the drum or 2 inch off the drum. We're never really taught that. It was always just about the flow, and I think that's maybe one of the reasons why when you look at a pipe band drum corps, it's almost like everyone's kind of got their own kind of little kind of weird style, something. Not everyone's identical, but when I watched kind of DCI or they're absolutely, bang on, and it's more about the visuals. And pipe band's never really been about the visuals. That's where we have the kind
Is
of the
that part
tenor.
of the criteria? Is that part of the criteria and the competitions? The visuals?
Well, only for the bass section. So the tenor drummers will do flourishing and things,
Yes.
but pipe band's always judged from the back. So the judge
Ah,
is never watching it. So that's one of the things that's probably different as well.
yeah.
I always judge from the back. I never watch a drum corps from the back. I always want to watch them,
That's why. So that,
and I always want to see what's going on. But I think even that's why the drums are angled the way they are in pipe band as well. So our drums kind of sit down the way to try and project the sound out the back more. And I know in drumline, like they'll kind of, I think they'll try and match up the drums and everything, like to almost be the same height and stuff like that as well. We don't do that. You just do what's comfortable. Like if you want to play up here, you play up here. You just do what's kind of comfortable for you, because it's never getting judged.
so
The
you're
judge.
quite liberal. Good.
Say it again. Sorry.
You're quite liberal then in what you do. That's good.
Yeah.
So I want to hop back in. I have two things to bring up. So one is you actually brought up that there's different ways to use your left thumb. Could you explain that?
Yeah, so primarily I will drive from here, sort of thing. But it was just sitting down with Jim. Jim does the incredible thing where he can play mummy daddies between his thumb and his index finger. But then kind of going on, he was kind of talking about that you can also do the same thing with your thumb. So you can kind of get right, left. So I kind of use a kind of hybrid between that. If I was playing. Here we're going to different terms here,
Yeah,
but
sure.
what I would call a ratamacue, or I don't know if this has just been the way I was taught, or maybe it's just lost in translation or something like that. But if someone said to me, play a ratamacue, I think you'd call it a Swiss seven. Whatever, maybe it's just me
Sure.
not knowing the
Yeah.
proper names or whatever. But if I was to play what we'd call a Ranocure or a Swiss seven, I would actually dig in. So off the left, right. I would dig in with my thumb for the left, and then open up. So I'm kind of going daga digga digga da, daga digga digga da.
You're
Um,
you're bending that. You're bending
kinda
that thumb knuckle.
digging in with it, and then opening out. And then you probably won't see in the angle here, but you can kind of try and so I'm just kind of going between here and here, da 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 da. I don't know if you can see it.
So, yeah, so if you were to describe that, you have the webbing of the left hand that the stick is sitting in, but then you're bending the thumb knuckle and releasing that thumb knuckle to get these two different approaches.
You're kind of getting this kind of thing.
That's cool.
And it's one of those things that you probably don't think about. You
Yeah.
just and it wasn't probably until I was sitting down with Jim and we're talking about it, and I'm going, yeah, when I play around here, I'm kind of digging in with that, and then it's one of those things when you start talking about it and you try to do it, and you're like,
Yeah, totally.
I don't know.
That's fantastic. I mean, at that point too, it's funny because every country has their own interpretation of what they call that. So I know, talking to some of the old guard guys, Matt Bell and Alex Coldell, they would call that a Scottish Ratamacue, and we're like, oh, okay, that's a Scottish Ratamacue, not an American Ratamacue because there's one extra note. And that's okay, but then it's is it a final of 7 kind of, because it's sort of got a Swiss flavor to it.
You don't think that's so interesting though, like how it could have been that it's just maybe something that might have just got lost in translation or something like that, or like as kind of years go on. I don't know, but I think it's really interesting.
Yeah. So on that, I want to go into the competition scene just a little bit further. So I think it's very interesting when you talk about where the judges are placed in the competition scene. So in the competition, when they're judging the drum corps, what are the criteria? What are the categories that you're being judged on?
So one of the main things is being able to play tight as a unit. You'll get the kind of clarity coming through. You get judged on the ensemble, playing with the how well the corps is integrating with the pipe corps as a band, and then you judged on other things, just like kind of dynamics, phrasing, and just all kind of things like that. But yeah, it's all purely based on, for as far as snare drum is going, it's purely based on the sound. You know, there's nothing visual to it, which is where the bass section come in with the tenor drummers flourishing. Unfortunately, it's something that's not actually judged, really. There used to be a bass section prize, but I mean, if you think about it, when a judge is playing and a judge is judging, he's writing a crit sheet. You know, he's not really looking up all the time.
Yeah.
But there's in a kind of major competition, there would be 2 piping judges, 1 ensemble judge, and a drumming judge, and then it all goes down to points, and the person with the least score wins.
Is that out of 100? What's the score range?
So I believe it used to be out of 100, and I think there's still a few places in the world that do that, but now they're basically just doing it 1 to 6 sort of thing.
Okay.
And you do get a summary, so they do the whole kind of like first band to 12 band sort of thing. You get a summary at the end, but the prizes are the first 6.
Okay, interesting. So I'm going to hop into this one thing. This is interesting. So we're talking about technique, talking about style, talking about different, you know, WGI, DCI, pipe band, fife and drum, Basel style, and French style. And I think this idea that you talk about with flow, a lot of folks will try to talk about the most efficient, quote unquote, efficient style or efficient technique. And I always kind of debunk this because my question is, what even is efficiency? Efficiency to do what? It's about being effective more than it is about being efficient. So what are you effectively trying to achieve? And if you're trying to effectively achieve the cleanest, quote unquote, cleanest look, I don't know if that's necessarily the goal. And so when I look at French drummers and I see how their arms move them, I'm enamored because they have a very French style that they bring, but they're holding the grip of the stick with this old military drumming grip that a lot of people now will consider French grip or Basel grip or Swiss grip. And when you go back into the day and you start looking at these old drumming paintings or pictographs or prints, that right hand kind of baseball bat kind of grip is really an old traditional military grip. And then you start looking into like the Gus Muller stuff and it starts getting into kind of more of where the fingers come into it a little bit, because he was studying this bridge period between 1890s and like 1910, 1920s. But then when you get into the orchestral world and you start talking about how does a drum sound inside of a concert hall, you start getting into this technology now of the types of heads and the plastic heads that come out. And then you get into this idea of right now, I think when it comes into it and you start talking about the finesse and the power and the control of that high tension head, that's where pipe band drumming, in my viewpoint, really shines, because it is so detail oriented where, yes, you can bring the power, but you're controlling with that top snare mechanism, you're getting these light touch details that if you didn't use that finger control, you wouldn't really be able to express the way pipe band drumming's really come into it. So, I mean, I think it was really pretty interesting how you walked us through the difference between the American grip, where it's going to have that more closed front hand in the right hand with the thumb. And now when you open up those fingers, you talked about the pinky being on or not being on, but now you're kind of bringing in a little bit more of maybe more the power side of the house without losing that finesse. And I think that's impressive. And that's next level stuff.
There's so many ways to do it, you know, like there's no rule book or anything like that, you know, that's like this is the only way you can hold a drumstick or anything like that, you know. It's all everyone's kind of interpretations, and then people kind of do, you know, what kind of works for them. But I just do what kind of works for me, you know, like and so there's no kind of wrong way to do it, really.
But how do you teach that then, Stephen? I mean, I think that's now very interesting. I mean, how do you? I mean, you showed us now how you can achieve it, and we talked about how your efficient can be really. But how do you teach that then? How do you start?
With all my students, I'll be really particular on technique. You know, so I will try and get them to play the way that I play. Not to say that that's the best way, but that's what I know. You know, so they're but they can.
I have heard this. The best way, from Eric Perilou, who was a master American rudimental drummer, says, "Your job is to create mini me's."
yeah, I remember that, Mark. So you're in Melbourne. Are you teaching in a school?
Yeah, so I work full time here in a private school in Melbourne. And we've got a pipe band program where we start the boys from around year 7, which is around age kind of 13, and then they come for weekly lessons. We do it all one-on-one, which is great as well. They have one-on-one lessons, then they have group lessons, and then we've got 3 bands in the school as well, so it's kind of split into an A, B, and a C, and then there's that kind of progression that the boys start. They get into the C band, then they start learning the B band tunes, get into the B band, and then into the A band, which is the kind of the best band, which is usually made up of the kind of older boys, having gone through the kind of whole program. So I've just started at the school. I'm just on my second year now. So I'm really looking forward to the boys that I've kind of started from the ground up, and they're just starting to come through now, which is really exciting. So yeah, we're the scene in Australia for pipe bands obviously isn't as big as the scene in Scotland. We only have a few competitions here each year, and but it's still good for the boys to get out and have that experience of competition and being part of a team, and then when they do come to leave school, there are still other options that they can do if they want to keep playing. They can go into one of the adult bands here in Australia, depending on what level they're at. There's going to be a band suited to them. So I think that's one of the rewarding things as a tutor. When you do see people going into adult bands and kind of doing what you did when you were younger.
How long does it take, Stephen, when you start drumming to have the opportunity to play in the band?
Yeah, so you can start really pretty quickly. Is once you get the kind of basic rudiments down, how to roll, then you usually get started on the kind of mass band beatings, so like a little 3/4 march or a 4/4 march. And if you're in novice juvenile or in one of the lower grade bands, that's what you can compete with, So I've got a couple of year 7 boys just now who've literally just started, and they're on their second term, and they can already play the competition marches. So they're going to be straight in with the older boys for their first competition in the start of August. So that's really exciting.
So how long would that be then? When you say 2 terms, that's
So
2 years?
so that was from they started in January, and now they could. I mean, they would probably be able to play quicker than that. They'd probably be able to play around June, so around 6 months. 6 months of playing, and you could definitely get in your first band.
So that's quite a quick approach. So you are very efficient in how you implement, how you say, integrate the students into your bands, and I think that's a key point when we talk about education, to make sure that they are from day one integrated, but especially can perform as quick as possible.
Yeah. And the syllabus that we work off as well, it just kind of slowly just progresses each lesson, and then by the end of every kind of chapter, you're hit with a drum score, which is everything that you've already covered. All the rudiments, and then we're just putting it into a drum score. So it is a really good, a kind of almost like a kind of conveyor belt. Just like from novice to playing in a band, which is good.
But in Scotland, you start with earlier. You start with 9 years old, you said.
Yeah, well, I mean, there are many programs in Scotland which they do get the kids a lot earlier. Just at the establishment that I'm at, we get them in year 7. But like myself, I didn't do it at school, so I was playing from a younger age. But as I said, there are plenty of programs in Scotland now where they are starting them from a young age, which is really exciting.
So I want to hop on that real quick. So, I mean, teaching, obviously, style and technique is one thing, right? But then there's the actual how you communicate as a teacher. And so when Jim was teaching you, and I didn't know that you also studied under Gordon Brown, which is really cool as well. I mean, this is like, you got to study with the who's who. And I think that also probably blended in because probably Gordon had a little bit of a different approach than Jim, and how they would, maybe describe certain ways to phrase things or how to play it. I just also know, I mean, Jim is also a very warm, kind human being. So, I mean, from a teaching point of view, I'm assuming these guys would be some of your largest mentors. Would that be accurate?
Oh, absolutely. Jim's he's a hero. Like, he's an absolute hero and an absolute gentleman as well. And yeah, there was some kind of different kind of style that Boghall had and that Shots had, and actually took me quite a while to adapt to that. So it's quite a funny story, actually. Or well, it wasn't funny at the time. But when I first joined shots in 2010, playing grade 1 at a young age already, won kind of a few championships and stuff at Boghall, and 13 years old. Joined then when I was 16 or whatever. But you're walking about, you're like, oh, I'm this young drummer, thinking this, thinking that. And then I joined shots, and I played the first 4. It might have been the first 3 or the first 4 competitions with shots. And I remember being at practice, and just to go off on a tangent, so the shots drum hall was tiny. Like, it was this tiny little room, and imagine like 11 snare drummers and like 10 bass section guys all in this one little room. And I used to sit in the hot seat, which was right next to Jim, all right? And if there was a roughness or whatever, like, Jim would go around the corps one by one, so I'm kind of sitting there waiting on my turn, and they always go around the opposite way from me. So everyone's playing through it, and it's clean. The next guy is like clean. So then it gets to you, and you're the only one left. You're going, oh, well, it must be me, So then all of a sudden, you're holding the sticks like this, and you forget how to play, and like, so it was always quite funny. So when going through that, trying to find out where the roughnesses were in the corps, and I came from this other corps who had a different style. Not to say that it was any better or any worse. It was just different. The sticking, even the way that they did hold the sticks as well, it kind of changed a little bit. And it was just a different way of playing. So we'd go around the corps, and there was roughnesses happening, and it was me. And then I remember I got the phone call from Jim, and he was like, Stephen, I'm really sorry. I can't, and a long story short, he was like, we can't play you at the Worlds. And from that, like, that was, the whole world just fell out, under my feet for me then, and, going from such a high, for previous years, to then all of a sudden you're going to be standing in the sidelines, watching. So that was really, really hard at the time. But like, credit to Jim, like, so the whole Worlds week is probably Jim's busiest time of year, in regards to his business and everything, and going up to the Worlds and all that. And I knew I wasn't playing on the Saturday, but Jim still met up with me on the Thursday, I think it was, and still had a practice with me. So I think that just kind of shows the kind of true kind of gentleman that he is, that even though he knew I wasn't playing, I knew I wasn't going to play the Worlds, but he still made the time to sit with me. And then, I would go up to band early and sit with him, and he really, really helped me it really helped me kind of develop my playing even further. And then, so the next year after that, from going, the lowest point of my drumming career, getting dropped from the corps that I'd always wanted to play with, the next year, we won the World Championships, so it's one of those things that I kind of tell the students as well, that, practice does everything, then as long as you put the time into it, then you can always do it. So I think that one always really stands out for me as well as a performance, just because I went through so much the year before to then get to that point, and then it's not always about the winning, but winning, that was my first World Championship win as a drum corps as well, so it just made it that even much better, just the struggle to kind of get to that level as well.
I think it's hilarious, and it's hilarious and terrifying, and you have to have that moment. I think as a good player, you have to have that moment where you get humbled. And I remember getting cut. I went up to Cavaliers DCI Corps in '98, and I remember getting cut, and it was the first time I had won, fife and drum championships and all that stuff. But I will also tell you, when I sat there and got cut, and I recognized it, like, I needed that to happen. And I will tell you, like, it was Mike McIntosh and Brett Kuhn from me, like, and I hold these guys and because that happened, I respect them even more, because I started learning from them. Like, what was it about me that didn't fit? What was it about me that I still needed to learn? And when you're a young up and coming drummer and you think you can conquer the world, you need that humility piece to come there. And I actually will always be grateful for those guys to have that, and they were so kind about it. And they, like, walked me through, let's help you get to some other places. And it was a very powerful moment for me as a young drummer.
How old were you, Mark?
19.
19.
Yep.
But I think that's also something what bothers me now, because I have students between 6-7 years old and 21, and I for me it's always amazing to see when we lose them, when we have to engage them to bring them to the higher level. I mean, with us, it's typically you go to the army service, or you train when you're 16 to 19 before you get that. That's the highlight if you are a convinced drummer. But I see that I think it has also to do with your ripeness and which stage you are when you are a teenager, when you need that challenge in a positive way and see that opportunities. I think it's quite interesting discussion. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Ollie, let's hop into the last few questions here.
Yes.
So I think you have a couple that are on the bottom of our list here.
Yes, and let's stay with the education and how we're doing it. And I mean, you did some excellent examples in digital drum lessons in the Shed drum. I think that's a very modern way to show it, and also very professionally done. So congrats on that. But how do you see this digital education as a part of our? I think that it was a boom now, and I think there's a lot of opportunities. How do you see that a little bit?
Yeah, I think the whole COVID thing and with everything going online, well, it was I was just so lucky that I was still able to continue working. For a start, there was a lot of people there that were out of work, and I just kept telling myself how lucky I was that I was still able to kind of work in every day, and the whole school teaching just went straight online. And we'd always kind of done online lessons and stuff before, but never to that capacity where it was every single day. And I honestly don't think that the boys are any better, any worse off than COVID, because what we did is we just kind of restructured the whole kind of material and got the boys learning new things. So Zoom's great for that. I can play a little bit, you can play it back to me, sort of thing. So it was great for the boys to learn new material then, but then it came to the point where we just couldn't play it together. So we were just itching to get back and actually play it together. So is that kind of way goes. I don't think we kind of missed out, which is kind of good. I think we kind of did our best with a bad situation. But the whole digital thing now is just it's bringing that whole rudimental world so much closer together. As a kind of 10-year-old playing in a pipe band, you don't really think of any other way of drumming or anything like that. And it's only as I've got older, and I'm just such a drumming geek, like drumming nerd, absolute drumming nerd. And I love
that. We can confirm that. We saw that.
And I'm proud of it. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. But yeah, it just... and it kind of allows people to maybe take lessons and things that they wouldn't have done before, So, people are just kind of sitting about the house and, they maybe see someone pop up on their story they've never even heard of, but they love what they're doing, so they contact them and get a lesson. I think maybe more people were taking lessons and stuff as well. And I was taking lessons with other drummers, One of the things that my dad always drilled into me was, good tuition. And the cool thing about this rudimental game is that you never ever complete it. You can never complete it. There's always another way to modify it, and you're never going to compete it. If someone ever says, what's the perfect drum roll, no one knows what the perfect drum roll is, but I'll try every day to try and replicate that.
Okay, so but how important? Sorry to stop. But how important for you is, for example, I want to dig into a little bit deeper. Notation, for example. We see a lot of notation behind. We discussed before how it has to be supported digital things. Is that important in Scottish drumming, or is it more really show and tell and listening?
Yeah, in regards to if everything's kind of noted down in regards to drum scores and things, or so everything's kind of noted down. We use the kind of monolinear system as well. So like I it's obviously something that I've never been trained to do, but when I look at a piece of music, snare drum music that's got R's and L's down the bottom, like my mind is just like, I can't handle it. Like I can't process it. It takes me so long.
But I'm asking that, and I think, Mark, this is something we have a lot of discussion on what is the advantage on digital education, and you mentioned it. The key core is to share our drum styles, to learn each other. I mean, I met you because of this. I mean, I'm very privileged, because we couldn't meet in the last nearly 2 years. And this is very clear. But I think it's also a big discussion, and maybe that's also something what I will ask you is, what do you think where it goes to in education, and also a little bit, where is our journey going, and how do you see what is the most important thing we, and now I'm talking as chairman, like Mark, also as an important person in SIRD, what do you expect from us, or how can you see the biggest value we can bring, and how can you bring to the community? Because I think it's now exactly key in this situation, and how can we do that, and I think we have a lot of discussion, so maybe you have some insights or personal opinions on that.
So just in regards to what online tuition can do for the drumming world, or sorry,
Everything. So let's start with the digital one, but definitely as well a little bit, where shall we go? In which direction shall we go from SIRD, and also from the education, and how much, or what is really bringing something further for us? What is something what we can profit the most?
Yeah, looking through the kind of stuff that Sir's got, looking at those online kind of master classes and things, I think that's incredible, and being able to be exposed to a kind of different drumming culture that you wouldn't have normally been exposed to, or wouldn't have came across. There's so many guys and so many people on social media that I've came across that I would have probably never heard of, if it wasn't for being online and people putting out more content. But yeah, doing online master classes and things like that, I think a lot of people are now coming around to the idea that video lessons are actually okay. A lot of people would maybe go, I don't want to do a Skype lesson. It's maybe not going to be as good as having a one-to-one. And right now it's probably not, but I think it's definitely getting better. And I think that the fact that COVID happened, I think we'll see kind of advances in technology so that it does become better and there's no latency. And I think we're onto a good thing there, where you can just Google drumming and there's guaranteed to be something that you'll be able to learn from. There's so many things on YouTube as well, just that you can learn, and I feel like the content's getting better and better as well now, where people are able to stick the notation in the videos and stuff now, and it's really kind of engaging that way. So I think it's really exciting, and I think we're just at the start of it as well. I think it's going to get a lot better.
Yeah, and I think that's something interesting too. A lot of people are saying, well, I'm really sick of sitting on Zoom. I'm sick of sitting on Zoom. I'm sick of sitting on Zoom. But the thing is, it's here to stay. And I think what happened is we got shoved through the door. And even though it may not be the most optimal and it may not be everyone's first preference, you're right. I don't think it's going away, because now we know that we have this access at a finger click of just being able to go across the entire world at any moment. So I think when it comes to effectiveness and efficiency, we definitely have this online efficiency that we have, but we know that in-person one-to-one contact is definitely more effective. And I think, when we got to meet together at PASIC a few years ago through Stuart, and then Ty Fry, who was there, and Danielle, and Jim, that was one of the things. So when Jim came, he'd always talk about his students, right? And he would always say he's a very proud teacher. And then to kind of see and meet the next generation. And I really feel like one of the things that you brought to the table was almost this generational story of your teacher, now your students. And I relate that immediately to my experience with my teacher, me playing, and then my students. And for me, this has just been a huge honor to talk with you about your journey and what you're offering right now, because I have a lot of faith and I have a lot of investment that I want to put into you and what you're doing for the drumming world. Because number one, you're a great human being. And I think that's number one. A lot of folks that have a lot of talent need that humble piece of their story to come into it. And I think when you have that humble moment where you're told you're not the best at an earlier age, you're then able to get past that one barrier early on, and then you can actually get down to real work, because it's not about you and it's not about the ego, it's about everyone else. So from Ollie and I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your story. It's been incredibly enlightening and inspiring.
Thank you guys for having me. I had the old imposter syndrome ripping out me when you asked me to speak to me. I was like, I don't know what they want to talk about. I don't know what they want to speak to me for. But honestly, no, thanks very much, and it's been amazing to be asked to do this. And yeah, I'm looking forward to whatever we can do in the future as well.
That would be great. Awesome. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure meeting you. And thanks, Mark, to bring us together.
Absolutely. I have one last thing. So if people want to find out more information about Shed Drum and you and getting in touch with you, how would we do that?
Yep, you can go to sheddrum.com, or you can Sheddrum on Instagram, Sheddrum on Facebook. Go check some videos out. Give me a message if you've got any questions about the technique or anything like that. Always love getting back to people. And yeah, you can book lessons and stuff like that if you were interested online. And we've got loads of merchandise to sell as well.
I love it. I love it. Stephen, thank you so much for your time. And I do enjoy seeing that you are in the winter season, or going into the winter season down under. And it's dark there, where it's just getting light here in the States.
It's getting cold here as well. I never thought Australia was cold before I moved here, and then
Melbourne is definitely the most European style, let's say, like Adelaide.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah. Sometimes it's raining, you know, all day, and I'm like, oh, it's just like Glasgow. You know?
All right, gentlemen, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
You for having me. All the best. Cheers.